Hi and welcome to the Essential How-To Guide. This is a very good video. It is essential, as it says in the title. It's going to explain some of the important parts that you're going to need to know before you actually start looking at the individual tutorial videos for the different elements of the set. Okay, so one thing you need to take into consideration when you're building your pods is whether or not you want to use the peg connectors. This is a peg connector, and what it actually does, these connectors actually slot in to these little slots here and allow you to kind of connect the pods together. So kind of like this, and if we wanted to put a little end corner piece onto the end here, we'd just pop this in here. Again, pop it in there and you slot it together. And what this actually does, it gives a little bit of sort of rigidity to the whole thing, as it were. So you can see that I've connected some of these ones together as well here, and it just means that when you're putting things together, it gives you a little bit of stability. Now I have to say that all of the images on the website and all the videos that you see when you see like the promotional video, etc., all of these shots were done without using peg connectors, and the pods themselves sit together absolutely perfectly well even without using the peg. They're designed for that purpose, and so as long as you don't knock it, you know, there's no problem at all. It's entirely up to you. In order to use the peg connectors, it does mean that you need to kind of make sure that you've got a scalpeled hole on each one of these pods. If you choose that you're not going to use the pegs at all, which is fine, I never use the pegs myself, you've got then what it is, you basically, you don't need to cut out this little marked area here. If you're not sure, you might as well just cut it out. You might want to use them later on. Now, not every pod is going to have one of these connectors. For example, when you're using this little pod here, which is connected to this basic pod at the moment, we don't have a connector here which enables you to connect onto here. The reason is because this is a flexible wall and it really can be put anywhere. In order to allow this to have a connector in here, it would mean kind of ruining the front of your basic pods. So it's never going to be fully connected together anyway, but like I say, I don't normally connect any of the pods whenever I've you know, used it, whether it be for making the videos, etc., or just using it in a game myself. Okay, so if you do decide to go for the peg connectors, what you might just want to do first is actually just to print out some of the side supports. You know, print out a single label sheet and stick it down to your 1.5mm mount board. Just cut a few of these out, and actually it's fully marked up exactly where it is you need to cut, so you just cut straight on the line, and then basically, you know, when I cut these out, I'll cut the longest parts first, make sure it's fully through on both sides, and then, you know, you kind of just cut through this last bit here and kind of poke out the bit. Then grab one of your connectors once you've cut one out and just pop it in and see how it fits, see how snug it is. Obviously if it's too loose, you know that you're cutting too far outside of the line. Have another go until you get it right. That way, once you get to actually building all your pods, you'll know exactly where to cut and the kind of right way to do it, as it were. You don't want it too loose because obviously it won't fulfill its purpose, and also you don't want it too tight. If it is really tight when you're pushing it into here, then trying to take it in and out, eventually you're going to kind of start to bend and bow this area here, and the pods won't sit properly together, etc. So yeah, absolutely, just have a little practice if you're going to decide to go for that. One thing you can do as a kind of a compromise between the two systems is actually to kind of stick the bits and pieces together, as I have done with here, with just a little bit of blue tack. All you need, a bit of blue tack, you can see I've already done it here, and you just roll up a little tiny ball of blue tack and you just pop it onto your image like so, and then you grab it, secure it together, give it a little push, job done, and there you go. This is not quite as secure as obviously the clip connectors, but it is a little bit speedier, and it wouldn't mean, you know, cutting out all the bits and pieces, as it were, you know, if you didn't want to do that. And so I could do it again on this one. Grab a little bit of blue tack and just pop it on there, line it up. There you go, and that would be one section done, as it were. And then you could basically, you know, pop that on there. A bit like the actual peg connectors, we wouldn't want to put blue tack on this part here, because then we're going to start to kind of mess around with the actual image, and we don't want anything on the image at all. But again, that would be exactly like the peg connectors, and then you could pop some blue tack on that one and connect that one on there, and so on and so forth. If you wanted to do that, that's a great little compromise, and will work really, really well. Just gives you a little bit of flexibility, depending on your skill level, your experience with model making. You might find that actually that will be a better option for you. But I'll leave that up to you. That's a great thing about it, it's flexible, you can choose. Okay, so what I want to talk about first is actually getting to know the image itself. If I bring forward this image here, you've got 5 pod pieces on here. The trick really is to look at the images and get to know the image really well before you actually start sort of scalping it out, so you don't make any mistakes. What we've done is we've actually got instruction sheets for every single sheet that you're going to actually print out. So now this is an example of an instruction sheet. Now I've printed this out for the purpose of this video, but you don't need to print these out and waste ink and paper, etc. I've done this just for the video. You can view these on your computer, and what it does, it actually tells you exactly what it is that you need to do and where you need to scalpel. So for example, here you've got a key at the top which says if you want any green lines, means that you need to overscore, so you're actually going to score on the image. Now I'll cover scoring in a moment. For red, it means you need to underscore. That's where you're actually going to score underneath on the reverse side of the image, and anything that's blue basically means it's going to be cut completely out rather than scoring. So for example here, you won't be able to see it on the camera, but this has got a blue line here to show that this piece here needs to be cut all the way through and completely removed. You'll notice here that this part here is in full colour, and this part here is in full colour, and the rest of it's all greyed out. The reason is because all these parts here are just duplicates of here. So rather than having green lines over and red lines and blue lines over everything, because these parts are just duplicates, and in this case this is a single door sheet, and there's 3 single doors to the sheet, so obviously you've got another 2 doors on there as well. But like I say, you don't need to print this out. This is probably better viewed on the computer, because you can zoom in and see exactly all the parts you need to kind of cut and scalpel. Okay, great. So first of all, I'm just going to go through the actual scalpeling, as it were. Pretty simple. All you need is your scalpel, and here it is. Nice sharp blade on this. Whenever you're using cutting image, you want a really, really sharp blade. You'll probably go through quite a few of these blades, but it's better to do that than to sort of damage the image. I've got a pretty good old trusted metal rule that I always use. So all I'm going to do is scalpel out one of these pods for you. Pretty basic. Whenever you're scalpeling, what you need to do is you need to scalpel, if you like, almost not on the image, but also not on the white. You need to get it exactly, so when you're finished you'll have no image on the white area, and you'll have no white on the image, as it were. So I'm going to scalpel one of these out for you. Let's do one here. Just get it lined up nicely. And it's always good to kind of scalpel past the area that you want. Sometimes it's not always possible, because it would mean scalpeling into another piece of an image. Okay. And then round on this side. Okay, so this is the image that I've just scalpeled out. That should pop out nicely, and it does. And on here and around the edges here, I've got absolutely none of this image showing on the outside. Okay, and vice versa, I've got none of the white image on here. So you really got to scalpel, if you like, between the 2 images, not on the line, but between the 2 images, or between the white and the image. Okay, so what we're going to do now is talk about actually scoring and how to actually score the image. Okay, so if I bring back this piece of paper here, this photo image, it tells me here with the little tiny red and green marks exactly where it is, that the lines that I need to actually scalpel. Obviously I've done quite a few of these, so I know exactly where that is. And when it points to a line, the lines themselves look like they're actually part of the design, which they are, but I've done them there on purpose so that what I don't want to do is have like green and red lines all the way across this image here, so that the finished product sort of looks like it's got all sort of green and red lines over it. So I know where I need to score, and I'm going to score now. Now when you're scoring, again, I tend to use a sharp blade for doing the scoring. I just push down slightly with slightly less force. Some people, if you're used to scoring, some people actually have got special scoring tools, or they prefer to use a slightly more blunt scalpel and use the same amount of force. Doesn't really matter, but again, I would certainly recommend that you practice scoring first, as it were. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to go ahead and sort of score this image here. So if I score this first bit, this one's an overscore, so I'm going to score on the image itself. Okay, and I'm just going to... So all I've done is basically cut into the image. This is going to allow me to fold this like so. And that's a straight score. Okay, now when we underscore, in fact what I'll do, I'm going to just score the rest of these. Okay, so I've done all the overscores on this particular pod. You've got four. You've got one here, and then the same on the other side, one here and one here. Okay, now what I also need to do, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 underscores that I need to do. Those are the little red marks on your guides, on your original photo paper when you first print off. In order to do that, I'm going to need to score on the other side, but I can't actually see, once I've got this down for scalpeling, where it is I'm supposed to score. So what you're going to do, where you would normally score, or where you're about to score, you're actually going to use your scalpel and just make a little tiny nip in the edge of the paper here. So I'm going to do one here to show you. Just a little nip like that. And what happens is that when you turn that over, you can actually see here the nip on the other side. And if you do the same here on the line, you'll have 2 areas that you can scalpel towards. So, or scalpel between. So I'm just going to nip through all these sides here. And I'm nipping it exactly on where the little red marker, the line of where the little red marker was pointing. What I'm left with now is I'm left with lots of different scores across here and matching on the other side. Okay, and all I need to do now, same as what I did on the front of the image, is reverse score. So just score on the back so that the image can be folded away. I'm going to do that now. Okay, so that's all the scoring done. Well, now, another thing to remember when you're scoring as well is to do all the scoring on both sides before you actually make any folds. I mean, I folded this one just to show you. Otherwise, what tends to happen is the image won't lay flat and it's harder to score. You're more likely to cut through it without the pressure of the board. The scalpel's more likely to go through and cut through the image. Okay, so that's it. That's the scoring done on this. The next thing is folding. Once you've scored it, you're going to need to fold the image. This one I already did. Okay, when folding, especially with a sort of basic pod like this, you've got to make sure that your fold is kind of straight, as it were. If your line's straight, it should be if your line is straight, it should be a pretty straight fold anyway. But as you fold down, you want to make sure, obviously, that the bottom image is you don't want to fold it like this, otherwise you're going to end up with a wonky line. it shouldn't pretty much shouldn't happen anyway, because the lines are marked pretty accurately. So okay, so all you do is fold it down and give it a bit of a squeeze, because sometimes it fans out a little bit, and then you've got a nice fold there. Okay, and then if you fold back towards an underscore, you've got a similar thing. Just make sure that it's, give it a little bit of a squeeze, and so on and so forth, all the way through the image. Okay, and there it is. There's a folded top pod as an example. Okay, that's folding. So there we go, put that over there. Okay, so moving on, let's have a look at the mount board. We need to scalpel the mount board. This is the board where we've got your large single labels and you've stuck your image down. The mount board is 1.5mm thick. Because it is thicker, unlike the photo card, it doesn't really matter where, how you hold the scalpel. But now you've got to make sure that if you're going to scalpel down here, that your scalpel is, if you like, vertical or perpendicular to the cutting surface. What we don't want to do is cut like this or cut like this when we're actually scalpeling. Otherwise, what's going to happen is when you get your image out and you've actually got your piece here, you end up with a bevel where you don't want it, and we need flat areas. Everything needs to be flat unless it's actually going to be beveled, which I'll come to in a moment. Okay, so if I'm going to scalpel out one of these, choosing this one at the edge, I'll line up the image here like so, and I'll scalpel, and I want to make sure that I've got the scalpel here like this, not like this or like this. So let's see if I can line this up. And that's it, nice straight line. Same again over here. And there you go. When it's time to bevel, it's normally marked here, it says bevel, bevel. So on this basic pod base, we've got an area here and here that need to be beveled off. Okay, when you're beveling, beveling is pretty simple. You can actually get little beveling tools for cutting mount board. It's better just to kind of, do it yourself, nice and quick. It'd be quicker than rather setting up any complicated equipment, as it were. You kind of set the metal rule back further from the line you're going to cut. So here I want to cut on this bevel here, but I want on the line here, but I'm actually going to bevel it. I'm going to do it at an angle. So if I line the ruler exactly up with the line, when I go to bevel, I don't cut anything. So you need to just set the ruler back, and you kind of get used to doing this, sort of, if you like, by eye. And then now you are going to hold the scalpel at an angle, and we're going to kind of bevel off a piece like this. So just do that. There you go, that goes on there like so. And now I've got a nice bevel that just runs down here. It's quite a nice one. Same on the other side. And there you go, a nice bevel. And that, if you can see that, is beveling. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about gluing. Here's a single door pod. What I don't want when you glue one of these together, or any pod together, is excess glue all splurged around here. You don't want glue on the bottom of here because it wouldn't sit straight. If there's excess glue around here, then it means that when you put the pods together, it's not going to fit nicely. Also, especially on things like single door pods and some of the more intricate parts, what you don't want is splodges of glue all in these parts, because it's going to make it look not as good as what it should do, as it were. Okay, so as an example, I've got a pod here. What we're going to do, we're going to use what I call the edging technique of gluing. Edging basically means that instead of actually gluing directly on to this part here, in this example, or directly onto here, what you're going to do is you're going to put the glue not on the front surface, not actually on the inside surface, but actually on the corner in between the two. Okay, so we're not gluing here, we're not gluing here, we're kind of gluing at an angle. And what that does is, as this closes down, the glue kind of spreads across the front of the surface to make sure this is a good fit. You get splodges of glue that happen inside, which is fine because nobody can see when it's all closed up, and you get little or no glue showing on the outside, and sometimes you'll get a little bit coming through, and all you do is sort of like bead it off with your finger, but it's very, very slight. So I'm just going to demonstrate that now. Open me glue. So again, I'm not going to glue directly down like this. I'm not going to glue on the inside, I'm just going to glue on the edge. So I'm going to edge glue this now. So now I pop this down, do it back to front so you guys can see. Okay, so that's gluing. The next thing I can do while this one is kind of, well, it's kind of sort of dry, is talk about levelling. With these pods, we want all these pods to fit together nicely. Okay, so what we don't want is pods that are kind of uneven. So as an example, this is the skeleton for this pod. Like so. Whoops. Okay, I'll just put that there like that. And that would be the next pod next to it. And this would kind of fit over the top. What we don't want, when we put these pods together, is to have them, I'm exaggerating this, like this or like this. We want the pods as perpendicular to the surface as possible. Now, because these are very, very accurate, when you put these on the top, as long as you line up the edges with these parts here, it tends to self-level itself anyway. But what you do want to do, once it is actually glued on, is make sure it's level. So, with a pod like this, if you can imagine, I've just glued down the first surface. This one, you've got to imagine I haven't just glued this. Once you've got it down, you're happy with that, you take your metal ruler, or you take your set square, if you've got a set square that you're using instead. I happen to know that this is a perfect right angle. So, and you do kind of a level, and you check to make sure that it's level. If it's not level, you're going to get sort of a gap. Okay, and all you do is, while it's still sort of wet, you just move it. You move it sort of one way or the other until you get it just right, and you keep doing it, and you keep checking it on both sides. Check it on both sides until you're absolutely happy with it. When you're totally happy and it's, you very carefully just pick it up, pop it to one side, work on your next pod, and then when that's completely done, you then stick down the final side, a bit like I just did a moment ago. I stuck down the final side. That meant this one was already levelled, and because it had already dried, I can still see here that this is totally level, and that ensures a really nice fit here with these parts here onto another part, as it were. Okay, and in its basic form, that's levelling. All pods need to be levelled. All of these kind of pods, whether it's a standard sort of pod, a single door, a double door, consoles, any of the upright pods basically need to be level. The door ends, you get like a corner piece, a corner end, those bits as well, again, all need to be leveled, so that anything that butts up against one of these side supports with the same shape and pattern needs to be level. Okay, so there you go, that's levelling. Okay, so now it's bolstering. Bolstering is something that you might not do on you don't do on an ordinary pod like this, but you do on a single door. Just a little bit of bolstering here and on this internal arch. You're definitely going to do it on this piece here, and there's lots of bolstering on some of the more intricate room packs as well. Bolstering basically is something that enables you to fit two pieces of image together where there is basically nowhere or nothing to glue to hold them. This is the corner unit. What's ultimately going to happen is this piece is going to drop on here and glue on there, and we're going to end up with this kind of corner piece like that. But again, this has got nothing to glue onto, so ultimately it just kind of falls inside. So we need to bolster up, and by bolstering up what we're going to do is we're actually going to just pop that back on there, very rough, very roughly. In order to bolster, what we're going to do is we're going to add small pieces of card using just offcuts from the edge of some of these bits and pieces. We're going to add small pieces of card here, 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 and around the bottom, around here, and here, and here. That then will give us something to stick this to. And because we're going to do it right up to the edge, it's going to make a nice neat finish here. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to remember where we're going to bolster. If I grab this here, this is just a base pod card, if you like. All this extra card at the end, which is not getting used, you can basically use. So I'm just going to cut a piece of this off, like so. The good thing about bolstering is you don't need to be exact. There's no exact thickness that you have to cut these pieces. So I tend to just do some little strips of about sort of 5 to 7 mil, something like that. Sometimes you're going to need something a little thinner, depending on the piece you're doing. I'll just cut a few strips like this. And we're going to use these strips to basically fill out around these edges. One thing to remember when you're doing this is that when you're bolstering, some of these bolsters need to be cut at sort of angles. For example, if I bolster across here, this now won't fold down. So we make some little angle cuts. So I'm going to start with the easy bits first. I'm just going to bolster these two bits here. No real measuring involved here. I'm just going to grab this piece here, mark it very slightly shorter than the length, and I'm going to make a cut. And there it is. And because I know I'm going to have to do one on this side, I'll just move this along here. I'm going to do the same. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't matter if it's at a slight angle. All we do then is we're going to glue this piece up to the edge. It's going to go right up to the edge, not over. It can be very slightly inside the edge, and that'll make a nice fit when it comes to sort of connecting it on, as it were. But certainly don't go over the top, otherwise you'll see all gaps all the way through here. Okay, so I'll cut those two bits. That's those two bits there done. I'm now going to need a piece for the long bit here, and when I do this, it's worth bearing in mind that I'm going to have to cut this at an angle. So I'm just going to make a rough mark like that, cut it down, and then when I put that in there, I can see I've got this angle here. There's nothing too much sort of sticking down and in the way. Now in order to do the other side, I've already got this same angle here from the off piece that I've cut, so I can literally just turn that around, do the same thing. So now I've got my bolsters, oops, for this part here and this part here on both sides. Okay, so I've now got the bottom piece here and the top piece there. So I'm going to do exactly the same. Now when doing this bottom piece, I don't want to do it right up to, in this case, I don't want to do it right up to the edge, because this has to be glued at least, because it's a bit of a bevel there, I'd say at least sort of 2 mil of this, slightly over, needs to be glued onto the base here. And if I bolster all the way down to the bottom, it's not going to sit flush with this base. So I need to bear that in mind when I'm doing my bolster, which means this is probably going to be quite a small bolster. gonna guess better to have a slightly too less than slightly too much. And again, similar thing here. All you do then basically is glue each one of the bolsters onto the edge here, and I might do just a few of these at a time. So we pop a little bit of glue. It doesn't matter if you get a little extra glue here, but we don't want too much glue up the top of the edge. So I'll kind of glue slightly further back than what I need. Now you can see, this is not glued in place, of course. Now you can see that there's lots of edges here that will enable this part here to glue onto. You've actually got a gluing surface. Then all you do is you'd use the edging technique to glue down these parts here, down that part there, and this bit, which would normally still be connected to the top here, would then just fold down, and actually it would fold down and kind of fit on there, and each surface would touch each surface, and you'd get a really nice clean sort of, if you like, seam free finish on the top of there. That would be quite good, and that's it. That's bolstering. That gives strength and allows two areas which ordinarily would be very difficult to fit together to actually fit quite nicely. Now, what can sometimes happen if you're cutting out, doesn't matter which part it is, for whatever pod, or what can sometimes happen is that when you're scoring, you're a little bit too heavy-handed and you actually cut through an image, and you cut through it too much. So, for example, this piece here, which I removed on purpose because I wanted to be able to show you fully on the camera what I was doing, this should normally be scored. But if I was heavy-handed and cut through, what you could do, you could effect a repair, okay? And when you repair, it's very, very simple. All you're going to do basically is cut another piece of the photo paper, just an offcut, and you're going to use that to kind of tab across the back. And again, a bit like bolstering, you don't have to be exact, super exact with this. So I literally can take a simple piece, a simple offcut, and I'll do this. I'll show you how. Just a piece like that, and all I'm going to do then is I'm going to make a little tab for this to fit across the top here. So I want a kind of tab which is going to be, you know, cover most of the surface here. So that's a little bit too wide. Something like that. Yeah, maybe. Kind of like that. And then I'm going to score across it. Once I've scored it, I'll bend it. And when you're tabbing, you kind of want to make sure that when you glue it all in place, that you have it connected and sort of pre-bent to the area you want. What you don't want to do is kind of glue it like this and then start bending it, because with a tab you'll get quite a big, with a tab you'll actually get quite a large white area, and you don't want that. You want a nice sort of sharp edge. So let's just glue that on there. So there you go. That's what you do if you sort of make a mistake, as it were. Okay, so that's the essential how-to guide finished. Next thing for you to do is to pop onto your first tutorial video, which will actually be the basic pod video. Do the videos in order, and as you go through those, each video is got a slightly new thing on it, slightly more difficult to do, and that way it gradually builds you up through the levels of the modelling itself. Other than that, that's it. Over to you, and happy gaming. Thanks very much.